Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Dr. Henriette Runte was born in Transylvania. Her father, a National Olympic weightlifting coach, defected to West Germany and 2 years later emigrated to the U.S. and to Texas. Romania to Texas for a 13-year-old who spoke little to no English was a bit of a culture shock, but Henriette dove in and she excelled. Today she is head of the Center of Modern Languages in Hamburg, Germany, where she lives with her husband and 3 children. She's fluent in English, French, Hungarian, and German. We talked about many things. We talked about the intense pressure to succeed as a first-generation immigrant and the need to find a successful and safe career track. We talked about the role of serendipity in life, and we talked about the incredible importance of finding one's voice. Because thyroid cancer took away Henriette's voice. Would it return? How would she raise her children? What of her job teaching languages? In her silence, after years of chasing accomplishment, she finally had a chance to reflect on her childhood love of writing and theater. And suddenly she realized she had so much she had to say, share, and create. Henriette, if you would, tell me your story.
So thank you so much for having me on your show and for letting me tell you my story. Thank you. My name is Henriette Javorek Runte. I am first-generation Hungarian-American, but I have been living in Hamburg, Germany since 2001. I am married. I have 3 children. In college, I got a BA in human biology and a BA in French, finished pre-med and then did a master's degree in French literature and finally a PhD. And my dissertation focused on the sociological effects of theater on the community, and particularly on the Festival de Théâtre d'Avignon. I have been working at the University of Hamburg since 2007, and I am the head of modern languages here. So it took me a while to figure it out, and I think the beauty of it was that I drew from all the skills I had acquired throughout my life, and also on the friendships I have all over the world. So I talked to everybody. I got everybody's opinion and advice, and I spent a long time trying to figure out what I could do and how I could do it. I really wanted to create something that would help me explore my heritage and interculturality and talk about identity, culture, the arts, languages. And I wanted to make sure that whatever I did somehow furthered general education and gave back to the community, to young people especially, and somehow contributed to overcoming differences, to uniting people, to perpetuating understanding, and so on. So eventually...
Oh, no, I'm just curious because you left Hungary as a young child. Or how old were you when you left Hungary?
Well, I never lived in Hungary. I was born in Transylvania in Klausen. Well, the city is called Klausenburg in German, or Cluj-Napoca in Romanian, or Kolozsvár in Hungarian. It has actually 3 different names because there are 3, or at the time especially, there were 3 ethnic groups living there. There are a lot of Hungarians and Germans have immigrated since. So there are a lot more. There is a larger Romanian population living there right now. But at the time, there were a lot of Hungarians, Romanians, and Germans living there. So I actually was born in Romania, and my parents belonged to this Hungarian minority, which is why my father actually defected.
So, you were old enough to remember that process of defection, weren't you?
Absolutely.
What was it like? What did it feel like? It had to be terrifying.
Well, my father defected when I was 10 years old, and it took us 2.5 years to immigrate to the US. It was quite a lengthy process. My father actually defected to Germany and then applied for political asylum in the US. Once he was granted political asylum and could go to the US, then he could ask to reunify his family. So then all the paperwork and everything started on the Romanian side, but it took 2.5 years. So yeah, absolutely. And of course, being my dad was the National Olympic weightlifting coach to Romania, so he was quite known, and due to his position, it was also more difficult for me and my mother. So you can imagine, my mother was questioned, and they searched our house several times. So it was a difficult. We were watched, we were followed, things like that. So yeah, absolutely, it was difficult. And then moving to the US.
Well, that was my next question. And you moved to Texas, is that correct?
We moved to Texas. Can you imagine that?
No, I can't
Romania?
imagine. I cannot imagine that. Talk to me. What was it like to not speak English, land in Texas in this totally different culture?
Well, you're out of you're in space. You don't know where you are at all. It was completely different. I mean, you couldn't compare it, especially Romania in the 90s. We had only black and white TV, with no Western shows except once a week Dallas, and once a week on Sundays 30 minutes of Woody Woodpecker. So that was the extent, that we to which we knew the West. Language-wise, I had tried to study and learn English with my mother, but we knew how to say "glad to meet you" and "nice to meet you" and "thank you," but that's about it. Clothing was different. People's way of talking, everything was completely different. But yeah, but you have to. I don't know. I think that it's interesting. I mean, I am certainly the product of immigrant parents, and I think the biggest thing was that there was such pressure from the beginning to make my parents' immigration worthwhile. So that's kind of the thing that I remember the most, is that I had to learn how to be American real quick, how to learn to speak the language, integrate, roll up my sleeves, and achieve, make it all worthwhile.
And where in Texas did you land?
We were in Bryan College Station. My dad was coaching the Texas Aggies. He was the strength coach.
Oh, okay. That makes total sense.
Yeah, so it was in Bryan College Station. And I went to a tiny Christian school, a little private school, which was really, really important because I had individual attention. The teachers paid close attention, helped me a lot. So that was a great start.
And from there, college.
Well, so my parents, that's also interesting, because my parents then stayed in Texas for 2.5 years. And I think that it was important for them as well. That was their start. I mean, my father had been in the US, but only briefly. He was in New York, then he was in Houston. Then he was the National Olympic weightlifting coach to Korea. So he was in Korea for 6 months. So he wasn't American yet either. So I think it was important for my parents to have a start. So they started in Texas, and I think they made their mistakes there, if you will, the cultural mistakes, the misunderstandings, the awkwardness. And then they decided to move to Kansas, and my father got a job at Johnson County Community College. He became a strength coach, conditioning coach there. And that's, I think, I mean, if you ask my parents as well, that's when they say they started feeling at home. So in Kansas, that's when That's when we felt integrated. That's when we felt like Americans. I mean, right after Texas, Texas was really welcoming and a great start. But I think there were too many. It was a start. You know, you had to kind of go on and move past that. So yeah. So after that, it was college.
In Kansas?
I went to KU. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
proud Jayhawk. I love Lawrence, Kansas. So absolutely. I went to KU and did, well, I mean, like I said, I'm the product of immigrant parents. So I started taking AP classes and having them count towards college credit. I was taking these classes through Johnson County Community College, and I had about 2 years worth of college classes when I started my studies at KU. So all the math, a lot of the English, some biology, that was all, if I'm not mistaken. But there were almost 2 years of college credits that I had when I started. So I finished a BA in human biology, a BA in French, and all the pre-med requirements in 3 years. so so that was my reality. While other students were allowed to take 12, 13 credits, I was taking 25, 27 every semester. So
I think it's kind of interesting that you majored in French because you're multilingual now. Was there something about taking what would have been a third language at that point for you? Was there something that appealed to you about that?
you mean with French? Well, the
Yeah.
I went to in Texas, the private school that I went to had French, and I started taking French there. But it goes beyond. You know, my name is French. It's Henriette, and my parents love the French language. My dad, he doesn't really speak French, but he read to me in French when I was little. So I always gravitated toward that language. And then the truth be told, I actually wanted to major in theater and writing. You know, I maybe we'll get to that a little bit later to some of my writing, but I've been writing my whole life. And that's something I realized later on as well, that I wrote as a little kid. I participated in poetry writing contests. I wrote in Texas, I wrote a little novella for my school. I had only been in the States for 7 months, but I wrote a little novella in English. When I was 15, I was selected for a writing workshop by the Missouri Repertory Theater. So this was something that I was kind of showing some talent for. But there was no time for that. Like I said, I had to achieve, and achieving meant something quote unquote serious. It was biology or medicine. So truth be told, I actually wanted to go into creative writing, theater, something like that. But that was not a possibility. So the deal was that I wouldn't go to the 6-year program. The University of Missouri in Kansas City has a 6-year program, and I got accepted to it, but I got accepted a month late, which was sort of, if you if you consider the development of my life, I think that was I was very fortunate that I got accepted 1 month late, because in this month I was able to convince my parents to let me major in biology and at the same time in French. And the reason that was kind of my savior was because I spoke French really well. Also, part of the deal was that they would send me in the summers to France. So by the time I finished my BA, I spoke French really well, and very fluently. And I got a TA-ship, and I became a graduate teaching assistant. So from MA on, if I did a master's in French literature, I could study for free. So I was working already. I was teaching at the university the lower level French classes, and my studies were for free. So that's how I got out of becoming a doctor.
But now you're married to one. Any regrets?
Yeah. Of course, medicine is great. It was not for me. Anybody who was studying with me or who knows me really well, it's just not me. No, I think medicine is great. I loved the anatomy classes. I loved the human biology classes. But anything to do with physics, chemistry, organic chemistry, any of that side is not for me. Possibly I could have been a good physician, possibly, I don't know. But it's not. I enjoy talking to my husband about what he does for a living. I enjoy talking about medical questions. I actually even like reading the New England Journal of Medicine, science. I enjoy that. I used to teach English classes to medical students as well. So that part of it stayed. I just don't think I belong in a medical practice or in a hospital. But yeah, I mean, one thing that where I used my studies in human biology, I used to teach kickboxing and aerobics as well. So, but of course, that too, as the product of immigrant parents, I did it with certifications, and I did it all or nothing. So that really helped to the kinesiology, knowing the body parts, understanding the physiology behind it.
So from Kansas, with occasional trips to France, you ended up in Germany. How did that happen?
Wow. So no one thought I'd come to Germany. Everybody thought I would end up in France, marrying a Frenchman, or or maybe in somewhere in Latin America or something like that. So when I was finishing my PhD, I was looking around and thinking, where am I going to live? And I applied to several different places, and I got offers. I had an offer from Tulane, so New Orleans. I had an offer from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, but it was a 1-year contract. That would have been teaching French theater. And I didn't really know what to do. I was looking in Cyprus because of the weather. I was looking in New York. In New York, I could have worked in New York, but in business. So using my studies in business. That was something that sounded very interesting to me. And then there was Hamburg. And Hamburg, I actually have a girlfriend who was teaching at a language school. And I got a job at this language school. And that's how that's how it ended up with Hamburg. And I love this city. It's absolutely beautiful. It's green. It has a lot of water. It's big, but at the same time, very small. So it's a cosmopolitan city with a lot of culture, a lot of different nationalities. Very, very interesting and open and beautiful architecturally as well. In very centrally located. Yeah. And then, the rest is history. Then I started teaching here. I started teaching everything here. I taught from aerobics to, I had my own little language school afterwards. I used to teach language through sports. I I went into businesses and taught executives language, mainly English, but also French, while doing kickboxing moves. So this was this was fun. We were pretty successful. But I wanted to get back to the university as well, and then I was teaching at every single university within the 100-kilometer radius of Hamburg. And whatever classes they would allow me to teach. And then finally in 2007, I got I had another permanent job at the university that's called Leuphana. I had a 2-year contract there. And then after that, I started at the University of Hamburg.
Where you run a pretty big program.
Yes.
70 people?
Yes, quite a large program. Absolutely.
We talked, one of the things that I found so interesting about your story is that in some ways, your story is a story of all of us in that as we go through life, we all have these little bumps that we hit. And they're different for each of us, but none of them are really earth-shattering necessarily. And I mean, having your father defect and immigrate and your path back to Germany, I mean, none of these things were really easy. But what was the bump that really caused you to pause and reassess things?
Well, I think that it was really this losing my voice, and so the story behind that is that I had thyroid cancer. I got sick shortly after the birth of our third child. And the scary part was that no one really knew what was wrong. I had low-grade fever, 38.4 Celsius, which is, I think, a little over 101 or so in Fahrenheit. And this over a period of 5 to 6 months. I had night sweats and chills and sort of general malaise. And I was diagnosed with mastitis because I was breastfeeding. I was diagnosed with anemia. One doctor suggested that I was just depressed and wanted to put me on antidepressants. Some doctors thought it was just the after effects of mono. I was diagnosed with everything. I was diagnosed with atypical pneumonia and treated for it. I must have consulted over a dozen different specialists, and no one really knew what was wrong. And by the time I was diagnosed with papillary carcinoma, so thyroid cancer, and I was biopsied and everything came back conclusive, that part, I think I actually felt relieved. I felt like I could finally do something about it. The feeling of helplessness and powerlessness came after the operation when I lost my voice. And I mean, this was just so new to me. Sort of, I think sometimes people can't communicate because of language barriers. Well, I didn't have that. Language barriers never stopped me. It wasn't any culture or language that was stopping me. I just simply couldn't produce the sounds, and I couldn't teach at the university because there I'm speaking and lecturing the whole time. At home, I'm known to sing all the time. I love reading to my kids. I'm super talkative. I'm always chatting up the neighbors and everybody, and I come into contact with everybody that way. And all of a sudden, this was all gone, and I was completely muted, stunted. In 2015, I was treated for thyroid cancer and lost my voice for 6 months after surgery. I was completely paralyzed by this. I mean, losing my voice was absolute torture. And that's when I realized how much I still had to say.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. You can subscribe to our free podcast at www.bumpintheroad.us or become a premium member to hear the full conversation. Just go to www.bumpintheroad.us for more information and to sign up.